Hello everyone, and welcome. My name is Simon Jacobson. I welcome the new faces here, and anyone that's new online that I can't see. We are in the beginning of the Hebrew month of Elul, which is a special month. As I've discussed many times, time is energy, and as such, every month has its own particular energy and strength. And Elul's energy, which is included in its sign, which is Virgo or Psula in the Hebrew, refers to the month of love and compassion. So the energy of this month is love and compassion. And as such, it's most appropriate to talk about themes that are connected to that, especially considering that love is not something that this interests most of us. Everybody's interested in the topic. As I mentioned a number of times, that when I travel often, and the different program directors want to choose a topic which to discuss. So I remember one program director asked me, what are the top 5 topics, or the top 2 topics that people are interested in through my journeys and travels and experience? And I always say, it's always down pat, it's number 1 is love, relationships, sexuality, intimacy. And number 2 is always pain and suffering. And I remember this program director telling me, those aren't 2 topics, they're the same thing. Okay, I guess some people see it that way, 2 sides of one coin, double-edged sword. They say you can't live with him, you can't live without him, you can't live with her, you can't live without her, type of thing. So love happens to be love in the air, but the love happens to be a topic that is people are always interested in, and that tells you something. Not every topic everyone's interested in. I do a Google search on love, it basically triple the amount that you get on money, on health, on God, on so many topics that you'd think love. Check it out. I did a Google last week a search. I think 7 billion results or something like that. And the next closest is 3.5 or 4 billion. So it tells you a lot about that this word, whatever it means to each of us, is an indispensable component in life. Something we want, we need. When we don't have it, we're in pain. When we do have it, it has its positives and it has its negatives. So it's a word that remains actually quite obscure. No one really has a definition of love. A true definition. I mean, you'll find a love in the dictionary. You'll have words like affection or closeness or caring, things like that. But if it was that easy to quantify and define, obviously it would be easy also to obtain and acquire, and more than that, to sustain. So it's a word that is perhaps more books, more poems, more songs have been written about. It's a topic that we think about perhaps more than any other word. And yet there remains that elusive, mysterious force that we must have in our lives, and yet it's so difficult to really achieve in a full, sustainable fashion, especially in our day and age. And you can see that just from the misery index around relationships, around divorce, around commitment, and the many other things related to that theme. So, as part of this so-called L series of workshops or talks, I decided to focus on different themes around love, and this week, titling it, Am I Unlovable? Am I Unlovable? L secrets to finding love. Now, one of the most painful things to hear from a person is when they tell you that they're unlovable. I've heard this from more than one person in my life. It's very painful to hear because it's a very powerful statement. It means that you think that you really don't have the merit or the value to be loved. You know, many of us may have been hurt in our lives by our parents and so on, but once a person makes that statement, it really comes down to questioning their whole identity, for that matter. Now, people don't go around just saying I'm unlovable or something like that. But when you get to know someone and they talk to you more openly about their lives, there are people that do come to that conclusion. And they come to it with a whole case that whatever I've tried in my life, Whatever I've done has not worked out. So all I can do is start saying that I'm just simply unlovable. I'm not someone that people can love, or people can respect, or people can trust. I hope nobody here in this room or listening is in that state. And obviously, you can call this an extreme state, but there's a certain truth that many of us question at times, because we live in a world that is, a dog eats dog world, and when we're so involved in work and in competition and all the other rat races that we have to go through in our lives, and you start seeing that people value you for what you do for them as opposed to who you are, you begin questioning, what is your value? And if you really put it very bluntly, the question is, how do you see yourself? How much value do you really have when most of your value is defined by something that you are producing? Your buying power, your production level, your equity, what you're contributing, your youth, your looks, something about you that somebody wants or people want. And as long as that's there, you'll be wanted, so to speak, because you're needed. But as soon as that's not there, what happens then? The crisis that many people go through when they get to a stage of retirement, is what happens. And I've talked to a number of people where they're either mandatory retirement, or essentially you're basically hinted to that your time has come. What happens is, after working 30, 40 years, or 20 years, whatever it is, and you've contributed and were important contributions, suddenly you no longer have value. And since you may not have value in other areas of your life, it's a serious crisis. It's a serious crisis because that which you considered yourself as your contribution is now no longer wanted or no longer needed. You're too old, or whatever it may be. And we live in a society that is very fickle and very impermanent. What we value doesn't last very long. I mean, just take, for example, the sad story of basically every athlete after they reach their prime. We're talking about mostly in their 40s. I mean, in tennis, by the time you're 35, you're already over the hill. In football, the same. So there are some sports like baseball or some others that you can go till 45, already 50 maybe, which frankly it's not like the end of your life. Okay, so you're paid well, you're paid millions and millions of dollars, and you retire from your profession with glory, fame, unless you had some scandal, and were not rehabilitated, and you go away with hundreds of millions of dollars. So many say, that was a good trade-off, they got the money. But what can happen to the spirit of a person like that? And very few stories are written about post, because once you're out of the limelight, who's writing headlines about the people that are very retired athletes? Yeah, you're invited to the what they call the old-timers games or the nostalgic events, etc., etc. But if you did a study, what is this person, the day after they retire, what do they feel like? They wake up in the morning, they have all the money in the bank, they can buy anything. What do they feel like? Here they were in the spotlight. Take actors and actresses. Okay, fine. Today we need aging actors and actresses too. But take models. Models. Again, you're paid for your looks, but then there's a point where that look is no longer the most popular look. It's too old. So these I'm just pointing out elements of society. Again, I'm using more extreme ones. But the fact is we're constantly receiving messages like this, no matter what age we are, that our value is based on something that you are doing for others. It's really the essence of all advertising, that they advertise a product, that if you buy this, you'll be a better person. You buy that, you'll look better. You'll be treated differently. The whole selling of appearances, of impressions, and so on. And then, rarely do we have someone in our lives that really doesn't care about all this, doesn't give a damn about all these things, and just lives internally. People who really, their lives are not based on what others think of them. Their value is not based on like a commodity based on what people value in them. They just radiate from within a confidence, security, and these are people who do not ever ask the question, am I unlovable? Because their love does not is not but dependent on some particular function, but it's something that is just who you are, not as what you do. And I often talk about the difference between a noun and a verb. They say that love for men is a verb, and for women it's a noun. Love can be seen as an action, an active experience. I love somebody, or love is a state of being. It's like it's like being in a certain state. It's not what you do. And in truth, most real experiences in life are only real when they become nouns and they're not verbs. A verb is an active situation where while it's happening, it's happening. For example, if you say somebody is a good person, so good could also be seen. They do good things. But a good person is a state of being 24/7. If you're a good person, you're always good, even when you're asleep, even when it's inconvenient. You say somebody's happy. Okay, I did something today that made me happy. That's very different than a happy person. A happy person is happy all the time. As strange as this may sound, a happy person is even happy when they're sad. What does that mean? Not, of course, they're sad, they have some loss, but they don't their core being was not fundamentally eroded due to a sad experience. You could suffer, but not become a sufferer, because you don't over-identify with your experiences. So that's really what it comes down to. If you think about the formula, which of course we need to discuss how to get there, is are you a product of your circumstances? Are you a victim of circumstances? Are you a product of other people's perceptions, of your experiences in life? And if so, you can imagine how vulnerable you are to any experience comes your way. What really is the difference between a strong tree and a weak tree? You can't see it in a regular, normal weather day. But when a storm strikes, you suddenly see which tree falls and which tree stands. The one that has that built-in resilience and strength beforehand will withstand any wind or any storm. The one that doesn't, obviously when there'll be something will strike, it will weaken and it may fall. So these things are not always visible on a day-to-day basis because you can't tell. Everybody seems to be functioning, you're breathing, you're walking around, your heart's beating. But the real difference between, you'll see, what let's call truly happy people or truly lovable people who see themselves as valuable, now not out of arrogance, is because they don't identify. They're not shaped, their identities are not defined by their experiences and by the people and everything else in their lives that has happened or will happen to them. Because then they are essentially independent of circumstances. Now this doesn't mean we're not affected by circumstances. Nobody is oblivious and nobody is completely detached or aloof from realities around us. The question, as I said, however, is how much it defines you, as opposed to whether you've experienced it or not. So when you really ask the question about people, whether how much value you really have, not a simple question to answer. Because if you're right now a successful person in your life, let's say successful in your work and business, you're respected, you get paid for it, and your life is more or less functioning on that survival level. You're all right, you're doing fine. Obviously, we all have our ups and downs, but so most of us are satisfied with that. Why would I go dig deeper to find out if I'm really a secure person or not secure? As long as everything's working out, why bother? Why dig? But then when things don't work so well, or more importantly, when you face issues in life which your functionality and survival mode is not enough, for example, relationships. Relationships immediately are going to challenge who you are. Because you could play around in a superficial relationship without commitment. You could also do it on a functional level and, without any commitment. But as soon as it gets to a point where there's expectations and you become vulnerable because you care about someone and they care about you and there becomes all that opens up, then the issues like security and insecurity, vulnerability, value, identity become very prominent. So it's interesting that things like love or things like the search for truth, search for integrity, for God, for soul, anything that's not tangible and material immediately puts you in a position where you cannot just rely on some type of crutch or some type of security blanket, which is your work, your position, the friends you have. We all have our let's put it, our crutches out there. Maybe it's a strong word, but crutch, I mean simply that if you're bored, you call up a friend, let's go for a coffee. Let's go to a movie. We have our entertainment. We have our favorites on our phones or on computers or whatever it may be. We've got our list of so-called go-to items should be needed. That's like the security blanket, which nothing wrong with that. You know, a person has to function, but it doesn't have anything to do with who you really are. That's just simply a functionality thing in case you get too bored, or you're not comfortable with just sitting around with yourself because it can get too depressing. So we have places we run to, we escape to, and they're not always unhealthy. Frankly, it doesn't always mean something that's destructive or you're self-medicating, literally or figuratively. It just means that we have our circle of friends, hopefully constructive. But it still doesn't have anything to do with who you are. And sadly, the only time we really think about it is usually when things don't work. When things are working, the fact of the matter is, people love to, we always choose the path of least resistance. If you have choice to go and be introspective and have to open up your own inner psyche and wounds, or you have the option not to, come on, what would we choose? Who wants to be uncomfortable? Who wants to get out of their comfort zone and start having to explore and figure out, is this relationship real? What's my relationship with my mother, with my father, and so on and so forth? So that's not option one for most people. I mean, there are the rare people who just have that type of maybe need to just disrupt things, whatever it may be, or so they're always looking for some chaotic situation. But generally speaking, we don't go to the dentist because we love dentists. We go to the dentist because you got no choice. You've been in denial long enough, your teeth are bothering you, you got a cavity here, cavity there. Nobody goes to a dentist because they just love the idea to get drilled into and check out what's going on, the nerves and all that. Now listen, there is the element of being someone who has good hygiene and maintaining health, and you go for a health checkup, not necessarily because of a problem, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when there is a problem. We don't run because there's a problem. Now, I especially meant the dentist because other areas, sometimes something scares you, so you go to doctors. And again, I'm not talking about the hypochondriac among us that goes to the doctor for whatever, every time they cough. So the point is, the same thing as psychologically, just like someone touches you and you have a raw, tender nerve, the place that's tender, you don't want to be touched there. In other words, they say that joke, these two Jews guys, they both had sciatica in their leg, they got real pain, they come to the foot doctor. And the first one goes in for a checkup, the other one's sitting in the waiting room, and he hears the doctor, obviously checking him out, and every few minutes he hears a yell until he really hears the guy start screaming, because clearly the doctor's checking him out to see where the pain is. And it's real, he's hearing the howling and the screaming, terrifies him. And he comes up with his own plan that when he's going in, that's not going to happen to him. Anyway, it takes a half hour later, his friend comes out. He's limping and still in pain. And he decides, he's going to wait in the waiting room till his friend finishes and let's see what happens. Friend goes in, has the same sciatica, the same symptoms, and nothing. He doesn't hear anything. Listens closely. Not a whimper, nothing. No sound. He's shocked. What's going on? Was his friend just a tough guy? He doesn't yell from the pain? Anyway, he waits till he's finished, and he comes out, and his friend is smiling, and he's still in pain. And he says to his friend, how is that? We both have the same sciatica. He said, I showed the doctor my other foot. He didn't show the doctor the true foot. Now, this is one of the chelam type of stories where, there was no pain because he didn't show him the right foot. We don't like to go where the problem is. This happens, by the way. I know it sounds odd, and some of you just giving me a blank stare, but the fact of the matter is, this is a very common thing that people do. You hire a consultant, and then you don't listen because it's too painful. You're in denial, or whatever it is. It's not like you want to, but when push comes to shove, this is classic in psychology. This is called denial. This is called when you start talking to someone, you start saying to them, okay, let's explore your relationship with your mother. And they tell you, no, nothing to talk about there. I have it all figured out. I worked that out. Let's talk about something else. And you say, why not? Let's talk about it anyway. No. And the more they resist, you can imagine. So it's like someone who's being touched a nerve, and you don't want to go there. And there are times where you just don't even realize how blind you are to the problem. So in the context of what I'm discussing here is that when a person gets to a point like that, what can you do? They can't even listen. That's why it's somewhat easier. Here's the month of Elul. It's a month of love. Anila Daidi V'Daidi Li is one of the acronyms for the word Elul in Hebrew. It's made up of 4 letters. Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. and it has many acronyms. One of the acronyms is a verse in the book of Song of Songs from King Solomon, Shir Hashirim, where he says, Ani l'daidi v'daidi li haraya b'shayshanim. No, it's a poetic, romantic verse. I am to my beloved. Ani is I. Daidi in Hebrew is beloved. Daidi li, my beloved is to me. Haraya b'sheshanim, that grazes among the roses. That's the verse. And you can imagine there are many, many interpretations in it. But the most basic one, you're talking about love. That the secret to love is a reciprocal relationship. There's ani, I to my beloved, and my beloved to me. That's a good, healthy relationship. If it's only one way street, I love, but I don't receive love, that's a problem. Or if you only receive love and you don't love, also a problem. So it's a give and take. I initiate, my beloved responds, and back and forth. You know, I'm not going to get now into the grazing among the roses. That's another discussion. So this is Elul, captures the theme of this month, being what the theme, as I said, of love. How does it fit into, being the last month of the Hebrew calendar, which means this is the month that prepares us for the new year. Right, following this month, at the end of this month, we'll go right into Rosh Hashanah, then into Yom Kippur, the month of Tishrei, and Elul is also the last month of the previous year, so it's like a month of accounting. What connection does that have to love? Because essentially, love is what makes life go round. Love, in the words of the Zohar, is chesed. Chesed is love. Chesed ozlim kula yomin, it means. So it's a statement, an Aramaic statement, that means love, ozil, brings along or carries along everything else. Take away love from the ingredient of love, everything else in life will be lacking. So it's one of those cornerstones. There are other elements in life, for example, that you can get away with a diminished form of it. When it comes to love, love is necessary throughout, from beginning to end of a person's life. So let's define this love, and then go back to the question about unlovable and identifying what I said earlier, how you become defined by your experiences. So we'll get back to that. So let's talk about what definition of love in Judaism is, or in Torah. And it's actually quite different than most of the people would assume. We all know the prerequisite definitions of love as in nurturing, comforting, supporting, validation, companionship. That's on one level. Then let's go a step further. That love can be with friends and that can be with family. But then there's more romantic love, which also includes intimacy, sexuality, sensuality, a type of even vulnerability, being vulnerable with another person. Trust, of course, is always a critical component in love. And these are, if you look in the dictionaries or the basic definitions, you'll get some combination of the above. Maybe, there are. And as far as scientific theories behind it, they range from the very unromantic ones like Schopenhauer and the real hardcore evolutionary biologists who simply say love is an illusion, that nature pulls over the wool over a couple in order to get them to breed, because the cardinal rule in existence is survival of the species, survival of the fittest. So the love is just a ruse. The bottom line is to get man, male, female of any species, animal or human, to meet, to breed, to mate, so in order to bear offspring. And that's why bees will be attracted to the nectar in flowers. That's why men and women will be attracted to each other in the humans. And the same thing in every species in its own way. And they go through all their elaborate processes to find the proper mate due to either the best gene pool, strength, virility, different theories about how females in the wild choose their males and how the males choose the females, each for their particular contribution to one thing and one thing only, survival of the species. The best chance for this offspring to be born and to survive and to last. That's the general view, scientific view. When it comes to the Torah, when you look at the words ava, which is of course the word for love, there's other words, chiba, can be sometimes love, affection, and interestingly, that the word for intimacy, sexuality in Judaism and Torah, is knowledge. Not even the word intimacy. It's yada. Adam yada is chava. The man knew the woman, knew. Which really connects it to a very intriguing, that it's knowing the other person. Now, of course, most of us think, what do you mean knowing another person is not having a sexual relationship with them? But it means that the true depth of an intimate relationship is a knowledgeable connection, meaning that you know each other on a deeper level. It's not knowing I know and analyze you, or know you in a type of intellectual fashion, but a knowing, meaning an intimate knowing, where there's a bond. You really know each other, whereas with a stranger you don't know that person, or you know them on superficial levels, and here you know each other on the deepest soul level. So then how would we define love in that context? So the Torah tells it this way. It says that the man and woman, God created the human being in the divine image, and he then said that this human being is male and female. So they're essentially an androgynous creature, one entity, male and female, and then God separated, they would probably call it the light separated, right? The light? Yeah. They separated the male and the female, and henceforth, they go search for each other, they seek for each other, because they're looking to connect to that second half of themselves, that reconnects them to the divine unity from which they originated from. Now, if you think of it this way, it has a completely different connotation. First of all, it's nothing to do with any biological trick of trying to get two people to mate. It has nothing to do with it at all. Yes, it's true their union can bear offspring, but their union is not driven for the offspring. The union is driven for their soul connection, what we call soulmates. And secondly, it's not about companionship and nurturing and what we do for each other. It's actually for our very essential mission in existence, is that you really are not complete without the other. And I know this is not politically correct today. People don't want to hear that. What do you mean I'm not complete? This is the old-fashioned view that women can't be complete without a man. But the truth is, actually, it doesn't say that. In the Talmud, it actually says a man can't be complete without a woman. It's actually reverse sexism, if you really wish. It never says that a woman can't be complete without a man. It says that a man can't be complete without the woman. But that, regardless of that, the bottom line is, it's not about some type of diminishing of our identities, that you're not complete without the other. It means for you to be the fullest you can be, the best you can be, to reach a state of transcendence, and not just a state of selfish survival, you require another entity. Which is why God separated them in the first place. You could say, why, if they were all one, what do we need to separate them? Why create? Imagine if they were all one, we wouldn't have this whole romantic crisis. We wouldn't have issues with marriage, and there'd be no divorce, because you can't separate, you're one already. But that's exactly the purpose, to come into a world where things are fragmented, and to be able to, at our own initiative, discover these higher truths. So in essence, love then really equals transcendence. Now, most people would never say that. They would say love is all the beautiful qualities. Like I said, companionship, support, commitment, intimacy, everything I said earlier. But transcendence is a very interesting word. Now, if you want to have a place where this is explained, there's actually a chapter called Love in Hebrew. Love is pronounced Love, Lev. In Hebrew, Lev is a heart. Lev can be pronounced as love. Right? Lev is a heart. Love is the... So there's a chapter called Lev, chapter Lev, the heart chapter in Tanya. Tanya is the classic work of Chabad Hasidism by Rabbi Shneir Zalman, authored by Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, and he has a chapter called 32, called the chapter of love, because that's the theme of the chapter. V'ahavta l'ra'echa kamocha, which Rabbi Akiva says, it's a verse in the book of Leviticus, love your fellow as yourself. It doesn't just say love, it says love them as yourself. And Rabbi Akiva adds, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah, this is, how do we say klal gadol? An overall, an all-encompassing or a fundamental principle in Torah. Another way to express it is Hillel in the famous story in the Talmud, where the potential convert comes to Hillel after going to Shammai. Shammai and Hillel were colleagues who had a different approach. Shammai was far more stringent and critical, and Hillel was more lenient and I guess sensitive. I mean, they were both divine people and very fine people, It's just they had different approaches in their demands of their students. One was more demanding, one was more gentle. So Shammai says to the potential convert who says to him, teach me the entire Torah standing on one foot. Shammai says, get out of here. That's ridiculous. That would be like coming to a medical school or to a school of science and physics and saying, teach it to me all standing on one foot. It doesn't work that way. Education is a process. Knowledge has to be accumulated. It takes time, etc. Okay. So Shammai said the truth. Hillel, however, took a different approach. Hillel, of course, also understood that scholarship and knowledge takes study, but he did give him an answer. And the answer is the classic answer, the golden rule. He says, standing on one foot, the entire Torah, don't do unto others that which you don't want done unto you. That which you despise or dislike, don't do to another, to your friend. And then he continues, Zuhi kol Torah kula. This is the entire Torah. The idach pirusha zil gemar, and the rest is commentary. So go study. So he also told him that he has to study, but he gave him an entree. He gave him like so-called the central cornerstone principle, similar to Rabbi Akiva, love. However, he said it in the negative. Instead of love every person, don't do unto others which you don't want done to you, which is essentially the same idea in its the converse tone. The obvious question, which I've discussed a number of times, and Tanya just in a few words answers it, is how could you say the entire Torah is love? Part of the Torah is all about the social and moral and ethical behavior between people. But there's a whole section of Torah like eating kosher, praying, the offerings in the temple. There are hundreds and hundreds of laws that have nothing to do with seemingly treating another person. It's one thing, as I said, visiting the sick, having guests at your home, giving charity. That obviously can all be encompassed under one central theme called love. But what about those laws like praying to God? What does that have to do with love? And of course you could ask the question also conversely, that you see many people who keep Torah and they're not very much loving, and there are many people who are very loving and they don't keep Torah, so to speak. So the Baal Tanya, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman, answers the following. He says love is transcendence. He puts it this way: as long as you see your body primary and your soul as secondary, you really cannot love another person. Because your body occupies time and space, it has its needs. So how could you really share equally with another? Because materialism, by its definition, is defined by its time and space. But if you look at your soul as primary and your body as secondary, souls are not defined by needs. They're not defined by how much I acquire. You know, food, yes, if I have food and I want to share it with someone else, I'll have less food. But a soul is not defined by that. A soul is defined by its giving. It doesn't occupy time and space, and therefore love is equated with the transcendence of spirit over matter, basically. And he says that's exactly what Hillel is saying, because that's the purpose of the entire Torah. Even Shabbat, kosher, prayer, what are the meaning behind those mitzvahs? To respect that their spirit is more powerful than matter, that soul is more powerful than body. And as such, that is essentially the definition of love. So you can keep Shabbos and not be loving, that's simply because you're doing it mechanically and robotically. But the spirit of Shabbos is the idea that money, materialism, is not that important, because that day is a day of rest, now is a day of the soul. When you're more connected to your soul, you're going to be a more loving person. Basically, the rule goes like this: materialism divides, spirituality unites. And therefore, what Hillel was saying is that, you think about it, this is like a radically revolutionary idea. This is love. Love is transcendence, which has then another implication, that love is more about giving than about taking. The body takes, the soul gives. Anyone that's secure has no problem giving. Why is the body a taker? Because it's insecure. The material world needs to constantly devour and consume because it's insecure. It knows nothing lasts. So we hoard. We keep on acquiring more and more and more, because no matter how much you have, you always know it could always disappear. A soul does not function based on how much it acquires. It is an entity that is always secure with its own presence, that it's a piece of the divine and is therefore indispensable. If a person really thinks they're indispensable, do you think they need to acquire something to make themselves feel more special? They're completely fine with themselves as they are. Now, yes, there's a blessing to earn money, so you have wealth, you can give charity, you can help other people. But it's not your identity that is shaken or defined by what you acquire. So it's a very different meaning, love. Therefore, then love takes on a dimension that actually is the greatest gift in life, because what it's giving you is not just the ability to have a partner, someone who's supporting you, someone who cares about you unconditionally. That's all beautiful. But it gives you the ability to rise above yourself and become a transcendent human being, a soulful person. And as a soulful person, then you truly acquire the true definition of love. Now you have people who can be very materialistic and be very loving, but look at their love, you'll see it's always connected with strings attached, because they're worshiping things that are not about the person, but what the person does for them, as I mentioned before. Now, of course, the first place we learn about love in our lives goes without saying. We all know where that is. It's in our homes. Even before we have our memories, from the moment we were conceived, from the moment we're born, what's going on in our environment is our parents. Should they show love to each other and nurture each other, that becomes our first model, our first example. Should they not, God forbid, that also becomes a model. And don't underestimate what kind of impact that has, both ways. Because those that have been loved, have seen love, and have been loved unconditionally from the youngest of age, are light years ahead in the resources and the opportunities that they will have in their lives. I know it's a sad statement to make, but that's the truth. And those that are deprived of that are going to have far more challenges. Because when you don't get that unconditional nurturing and love, what do you think it does? It means you start thinking to yourself that you don't deserve it. And if you don't deserve it, you start becoming desperate for it. You start looking for it in all kinds of places, depending on others to fill the void. And nothing really is filled because nobody can love you. You have to know how to love yourself. So the early formative years, when you're loved in that way, it becomes a given. You know, imagine, just to use a very, I guess, it's somewhat of a disturbing example when I think about it, but I'll just use it anyway. Disturbing. Imagine a child, God forbid, grows up in an environment, in a home, in a basement, where there's barely any oxygen. And they have to struggle to breathe every second. You know, here and there. They manage, but they have to struggle. It doesn't come as a given. What kind of psyche then after 10 years that child is released from this prison and then suddenly sees what breathing is like. They'll see it as a complete anomaly, something that is weird. As a matter of fact, could even hurt them because they're not used to it, because they don't expect it, because they don't feel they even deserve it. So when a person is deprived, what happens is you create a different type of personality that adjusts to that deprivation, where you consider the deprivation as normal. When a person is not loved, they develop a mindset that they don't deserve to be loved. And therefore, wherever they go in their lives, they almost create situations, and not only almost, they actually do, that will ultimately disappoint them. Because they write that script, because that's what they think is what they deserve. It's done unconsciously, it's not something done deliberately, nobody's going to do that. But because that's what you see. That's what you've been brought up, and that becomes your standard. So it's obvious that a person like that is going to define themselves by what others do, by others say, which really means that you've never found your own identity. That's the real tragedy. So a love-deprived childhood really does not allow the flower, called the child, to blossom into its own, to feel confident and secure, and to be able to say, I can do anything I wish in my life. And the rest of a person's life, unless they work on it, which is what we're discussing here, there's ways to do it. If you don't do anything about it, that person will constantly be seeking a love that will never come, because it can only come from within, and they never got it from within. So they always think, where's that mother or father going to come and give me the love that I once that I was deprived of? And it's obviously an unrealistic expectation. There's no relationship that can survive that, even if it does for a short while. even if it has other conveniences, but it's not a lasting one because it doesn't have a foundation upon which it rests. So we'll talk in a few moments what one does about it. But I first want to describe the scenario. So when people feel that they're not value, they don't have value, and I said that they don't feel loved or feel even lovable, it's rooted always somewhere. It didn't come from nowhere. No one's born that way. It's because experiences in life led you to think that way to the point that you don't even think anymore. Now it's just a given for you. Which, of course, it's not true, but it's right now embedded in your so-called, like it's your software that just defines what you think, defines who you are, and nothing anyone will say can change that, because you say you could tell me anything you like, but I know my experiences. That's my experience. What are you giving me words for? So how does one resolve that? And of course, we're also talking, Elul is not just for people who have that issue. Elul is also for people who have love in their lives. In other words, Elul is not just for the unhealthy, or the people who are love starved, so to speak. So the answer to the first question is very simple. If you're talking about the biological model for love, or the definitions I shared earlier, some can say, you know what, it's too late for you. You didn't get it as a child, that's it, it's over with. However, if you take the Alter Rebbe's definition of love, transcendence, that it's soulful, remember your soul was never destroyed. You may not think you have it, or you may not know its value, but your soul is there. So the answer is very simple. I mean, I'd say the word very simple, obviously, with all the qualifications. Intellectually, it's very simple. Emotionally, it's not, but it's simple, at least on paper. What you need to do is do exactly what your parents should have done, which is nurture your soul. If you think that material success is going to help you find love, you're the last person that's going to help, because you don't have it. If you had it securely and then you got hijacked or distracted, it's one thing. Even that's not so great. But for a person who thinks that what they're going to do is pursue a material type of life, that's like the worst thing you could be doing if that's what you're looking for love, because love is rooted in soulfulness, not in material stuff. So the more you learn about your soul and the more you value it, the more you will learn to become a lovable person. Without that, you will be trapped in your existence. Which is interesting, because what is transcendence at the end of the day? The word transcendence means it's not all about how you see things. We all have limited perspectives. What is a transcendent experience? On a simple level. You're standing on the ground, you're looking up at the sky. Okay, that's one thing. Then you climb up on a mountain and you suddenly see a horizon you never imagined. That's a transcendent experience. Or you go to Niagara Falls, or to the Grand Canyon, or to some other wonders in the world, and you stand in awe of something far greater than you. Or you go to a wedding, and you break down in tears by the chuppah, by the ceremony, because you see love, and you're looking for it in your own life. All these are transcendent experiences. They're moments that are greater than you are, and they, so to speak, lift you up. It may only last a moment or two, but it's a transcendent experience. Now, obviously, the challenge is, how do you sustain it? How do you maintain it? It's one thing to go to a place and get inspired. Many people you go to Israel, people are inspired by it. Then you come back here, then you go back to regular life. It's very easy for us to get inspired, but to maintain it is very hard. The answer is, you have to really understand the anatomy of what happened when you had that transcendent experience. You know what happened? Your soul was touched. And you go back to your life, which is not a soulful life. So obviously it's going to dissipate. You live a materialistic life, you're surviving, you're doing whatever you have to do to survive. You had, for a moment, your soul was touched by whatever, a song, a flower, a horizon, a sunset, an ocean. And then you go back to your material life. How do you expect that transcendence to spill over? So the only answer is that you need to introduce spirituality, soulfulness, in your daily activities. So that way the transcendent experience has somewhere to hold. You can hold on to it. It's like lighting a flame. So the moment that you lit the flame, you ignited the flame, great, but then you move on and there's no more fuel. So it burns out. However, if you create fuel in your material life, what means you introduce soulfulness, so you have something that transcendent experience can hold on to. That's why you'll find even people who are very depressed or in difficult situations, at times they'll have, let's say, they'll listen to a song, or they'll have for a momentary experience that will like free them from the tentacles of their dark state. But the problem is not that. The problem is, how do you hold on to it? It was just a moment. You hold on to it, the only way is you have to introduce that soulfulness into your other activities. It cannot just be an escape. One of the reasons, for example, Nadav and Avihu, who ran in with ecstasy into the Holy of Holies, and they burned out, and they couldn't survive, even though they ran in with that passion, is because the key is not passion. The key is taking the passion and channeling it into your life. This is the reason that afterwards they're told, Aaron is told, Yayin v'shecher al teisht. You should not drink, intoxicate yourself. It's essentially the same reason why any type of foreign fire, or some people call today the incense of our times, drugs and so on, is not in the spirit of a person being able to sustain a spiritual experience, because you're using a crutch, and it's not you. The real challenge is, how do you take a high and make it part of your own life? And that requires the work of spiritualizing your daily activities. That's why in Judaism, yes, we have a Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we have moments, we have special days, we have a Seder, we have a Hanukkah. But that's not the majority of the year. Even Shabbos is only 1/7 of the week. Because the challenge is not to have a Shabbos or a high on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, it's to go back into a weekday, where you go back to work, and there you bring a spiritual type of consciousness. Then the fuel, so-called, you can call it the surge, or the jolt, the recharging you get on a Shabbos, has where to hold. And it also avoids what we call dissonance, the dissonance between two realities, one experience that doesn't have a place to spill over. This, in essence, what I describe now, even though it may not sound to you like love, this is true love. Many people say, I fell out of love with somebody. That's a verb. That's love as a verb. Yeah, you ignite the flame. It burns that long. The fuel is gone. I have no more fuel. What do you want me to do? I lost love. I don't love her anymore. Or I don't love him anymore. Because they've never really they've never accessed transcendence. They've accessed the love that I described earlier as a verb, the action of love. That lasts as long as it will last. It's a materialistic version of it, which is temporary. Someone who reaches the noun called verb, the state of being, it's a whole different world. That's not about an action. That's about a state of being, that you are a loving human being. That never runs out. I've asked people to tell me they don't love that other person. I said, what do you mean you don't love that other person, or you don't love, period? Oh no, I found someone else to love. They didn't run out of love. They're just no longer connected to that person. They found it somewhere else. What does that mean? That means that their love is disconnected from that tangible material side of things. So the challenge is really, how do you spiritualize your life? How do you bring transcendence into your daily activities? So then love becomes part of your identity. And of course also addresses the issue that I mentioned before, the topic about being lovable or not lovable. A soulful person, a soul, is lovable all the time. It has no problems because it knows it's connected to a source. It knows that it always has resources. When you feel connected to something greater, you don't have an issue. That's why you'll find people who have that moment of transcendence. They'll say, that moment, I felt like I belonged, but it didn't last. That's what people will say. That moment, that song that I heard, that moment of that magical moment was unbelievable. I wish I could have held on to it. But you could, because your soul doesn't die after that moment. It continues with you, but the problem is that you've chosen to live a life of your priorities are materialistic. So as complicated as it is, on the other hand, it's also quite simple. Materialism can never lead to true happiness. Simple as that. But everybody thinks it does. If I have enough money and I have enough security with that, everything else will follow. Now some people will admit that they admit that. Some people will couch it in other words. They'll say, well, if I can't pay my bills, how could I be spiritual? That kind of type of thing. But soulful people are not just spiritual. What they are is they're content from within. They are unshakable because their identity is a complete transcendence all the time. Now, obviously, that has to be then has to be translated into a material life. But then it's a whole different story, because then they are always in that type of state. They're always secure. And they're not looking for security outside of themselves. So the challenge, of course, is how do you get there? So how do you get there? So there's, what can we say, there's a 613-step program in Judaism that tells you how to do it. You know? So the punchline really is that you have to find in every daily activities. Here we are Wednesday night. It's not Shabbos, it's not Yom Kippur. And hopefully I'm saying some things that can be inspiring. But if you can create moments like this on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, on a Friday, on a Sunday, on a Monday, Tuesday, that's the trick. It's as simple as that. Think of it like swimming in the waters of the unknown, and you have no signposts, you have no buoys. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Buoyant. Buoys. And you have nothing to hold on to. So you swim and swim and swim until you get exhausted. Having signposts, meaning we wake up in the morning and you say, you acknowledge, oh, thank you for returning my soul to me. You say a prayer or two. You eat a meal with some conscientiousness about the energy that you're consuming. You know, you become a person who's soulful, and you find soulfulness. You're on a bus or on a subway or in a cab, and instead of just being involved with your texting or whatever, you say something kind to the person near you. These are ways that you begin to bring spirit into your life. And you do it consistently, you'll suddenly see what happens is, just like anything, like spreading seeds in a field. It begins to sprout. And if it may not be one thing, there's another one. The more you do it, the more soulfulness there is, and guaranteed the more transcendence, and guaranteed the more love. It's a guarantee. The problem is we don't do it. We get so seduced and distracted, and we think, you know what, I could always I'm waiting on Shabbat or whatever my next spiritual moment will be. That's when I'll try to get some, rejuvenation. But we don't do it at the moments when we need to do it. It has to be in the routine of your daily activities, not those moments, those special moments. So I'm traveling next month, and that's when I'm really going to dedicate my time to be introspective and really take care of my life. It's the small little steps that you do that matter. Let me explain it in simpler terms that everybody of us can definitely relate to. What is ultimately, all of us have parents, or even if our parents are not alive, we've had parents. So we're all shaped, we're all children. I can say that with absolute certainty that everybody here was once a child. Anyone disagrees? See? Some things we know. Now, I understand some people say, I wish I had a childhood, but my childhood was aborted, whatever it may be. But we're all once children. When you think about it, just think about it for a moment, hypothetically even. What are the moments that were the most special moments in your childhood? The answer is, you may remember a trip you took, you may remember a gift you received, you may remember a birthday party. That's all fine. But the truth is, the real events that really changed and shaped your life, you won't even remember. It's little details. I now have the luxury to watch. I have 2 children, they're married. So I watch my grandchildren. And I watch, it's the details, it's the little things. It's how you feed the child, how you talk to them, they go to school. It's things that are non-dramatic. It's not the moments when everybody is celebrating an event. It's the silent, quiet moments where a mother spends with her child, where nobody's watching, and there's nothing glamorous about it. There's no fireworks, and you're not getting awards. It's completely understated. I always think about it when you read the story of Miriam, when Yocheved, the wife of Amram, mother of Moses. So she sacrificed herself and her family to give birth to Moses, because Pharaoh had decreed that all the children, Jewish boys, should be killed, thrown into the river Nile. So what she did was she actually used the river Nile to save him. She put the little baby into a tarred basket, waterproofed it, and put it at the edge of the river Nile. That's the Talmud, the Torah in Shmos and Exodus, right in the beginning, tells us this story. And then she sent her sister, Moses' sister, she sent her daughter Miriam to stand and watch, and make sure, take care, and watch that child. later, because of those moments that she watched that child, Miriam was rewarded for her care. But when you read that verse, when Miriam is watching her little baby brother, if you read it carefully, you'll see it's almost like that the sensitivity. Nothing big happening. No one knew who Moses was going to become. The greatest prophet, the only man who spoke to God like a friend, face to face, and all the power of Moses. Little baby boy, and a sister watching him. You think about the scene, it captures what real love is about. And here I'm talking obviously love from brother to sister, sister to brother. What is love? It's a small thing. You don't even notice it. Someone watching another person, babysitting for them. It's not just a major event. Nothing happened. Like she didn't save his life. There's nothing dramatic about it. But Vatetzpeno, she stood there. The dignity that even though I have many things I could be doing, I'm standing and watching my brother. This is what a true parent does. It's not visible. It's not even something you can define. Now, hopefully, those of us who have had healthy parents can appreciate it and understand from this why we honor our parents, because they were there in times where they could have easily, more conveniently been doing all kinds of big things, quote unquote, and they spent time diapering you and taking care of you and staying up with you and comforting you, etc., etc. And doing that for all those years. Now, the situation where parents didn't do that, it's another nightmare that we'll talk about maybe now or another time. But we're talking now the healthy situation. That is love. Think about it. What's so dramatic about it? It's transcendent because the person gave away from themselves and said, you were valuable enough for me to take away from my time and needs to be there for you. That impact that has on a child, unspoken. You don't have to go around with a sign saying, I gave you 10,000 hours of my life and I'm worth $1,000 an hour. I'm not talking about that. It's the unspoken. It's just the reality. For a child, that gives the child a sense of value, that I was important enough for you to put aside everything and be there with me. Again, it's not spoken, but it's embedded in our psyches. That creates a state of lovability. You're worthy. You're valuable. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about being spoiled. I'm talking about just the basic need. Everyone hearing what I just said now, there's no one on earth that will say a child doesn't deserve this. Everyone believes every child deserves such a unconditional love. Why parents can be so horrible is their own selfishness or what was done to them, and we can elaborate. But everyone understands, whether you had this or didn't have it, everyone understands this is what a human being deserves. There's no person on earth that does not deserve this type of love. Why are we so convinced of it? Because deep inside of us, we all know that the soul deserves value. It's valuable. We're not negligible, dispensable creatures. The fact that we live that way is simply because that's how we've been programmed to think, and we start believing our own myths, the myth. When a person introduces soulfulness, especially in the details, you're basically introducing that nurturing that you should have gotten, or you did get, in our childhood, because that's what it is. Instead of focusing on material success, instead of going to work, that parent stayed home, or whatever it was, that type of commitment, I could even call it self-sacrifice, is a form of transcendence. Many people think as soon as they hear self-sacrifice, many people have a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, no. I'm not. I've been deprived long enough. I don't need to sacrifice myself. Self-sacrifice, in its healthy sense of the word, I'm not talking about an unhealthy version, is one of the greatest things a human being can do. It means your ego is not the most important thing on earth. You're secure enough to give of your time to another person without feeling diminished. Now, I understand people who feel very insecure and have very low self-esteem feel that if they give away 1 minute, it's like giving away your flesh and blood. But someone who's very secure and very confident with themselves, no problem at all. What's the problem? They don't feel diminished by giving. So the sense of self-sacrifice is actually one of the greatest acts of dignity and nobility a human being can do. I'm ready to put aside myself for another person. I'm talking about out of strength, not out of weakness, not out of judgment or expectations or something, but because that's what you want to do. That's a transcendent experience. Which leads me to the second point that's necessary, which is why in Elul we increase in acts of charity and compassion. What is the power of tzedakah at the end of the day? Giving to another. Financially, obviously, is the most tangible of it, but also time, advice. You know what the power is? It weakens your ego. That's what the power is. It's not just because the needy person has less and you have more, so it's the right thing to do. That goes without saying. It's more important, it weakens your yesh, as they say in Hasidic language. Your yesh, your self. That self-contained, bloated, inflated sense of self is weakened when you give. That's why it's so hard to give. Nobody wants to give away from their own inflated egos. That's why it's so difficult. But by giving, that's exactly what happens is it spiritualizes you. And your body doesn't want to be spiritualized. It wants more. And you want to give is really a form of breathing. And the body wants to not breathe. It wants to just inhale without exhaling. So when a person does that, by giving, that's the second way you spiritualize your life, besides the things I mentioned before, the little acts you do. It's an act of defying the nature of the material world that gravitates to be self-absorbed. Simple as that. The counter-force to that is tzedakah. That's why tzedakah shkula keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. It's considered, it's equal in weight, so to speak, as all other mitzvahs, because what it does is it weakens that sense of that self-absorbed self, which leads to selfishness, to greed, to narcissism, and all the other maladies that come from taking care of just me and me, nothing but me. Ani va'af si'ed, me and nothing else. So when we speak about God, that's what we mean by God. God means that it's not just about you, there's something higher than you are. So therefore you could really say God equals love, equals transcendence, equals Torah, equals spirituality. It's all really synonymous. It's all battling. The biggest challenge is the you, is the self. And the person who's, let's say, consumed with feeling that they're damaged goods and unlovable, how do you fight that? You got to fight that their conviction, that they're so convinced that they're unlovable, has to be weakened too. So there again, soulfulness helps, because as long as you're consumed with your perspective, in this case it's a negative perception of yourself, where's there to go? That's why arrogance can take on two shapes. Arrogance can take on the shape, I'm bigger and more important than everybody, or it can take on the shape, I'm worse than everybody. I'm a nobody. But who are you to say you're nobody? You know that joke in the synagogue. In Yom Kippur, whenever it was, the rabbi is banging his chest and saying, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. He's looking up to God. The Gabbai, the second in command, is doing the same thing. I'm nobody, I'm nobody. Then some peasant walks in, some simple guy, and he sees them doing that, so he's also banging his chest and saying, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. So the rabbi looks to the Gabbai and says, look who thinks he's nobody. You have a lot of these type of jokes, like they call, by Simchas Torah, they call up the guy, they say, the humblest person in the synagogue should come up to the front. So how many people are going to run to the front? The humblest person. So they had 3-4 people came running, and they said, and one of them reached to the front before the others, and the second guy says, the truth is I'm the humblest, I just couldn't make it so fast. You get the idea. The people who get rewards for their self-proclaimed humility. The point of the matter is that to make that statement that I'm a nobody is a very arrogant statement. So like I said, arrogance can take the shape that I think I'm better than everybody, but could also take the shape that you think you're worse than everybody. Who gave you that right? So essentially your own, but again, materialistic, selfish view is your own worst enemy. Who needs more soul than that person? The person who realizes, who thinks that it's all figured out. And you say to them, maybe, is there another perspective? And they say no. Well, God has another perspective. Your soul has another perspective. And they fight you. You're trying to tell them they're lovable, and they say, no, I'm not lovable. You don't know me. I know people hate me. And I see it again and again and again. How do you win such an argument? You're trying to tell the person you're valuable, and they're telling you, no, they know better, that they're not valuable. And when you say, listen, you're not that objective, I'm more objective. No, you're just idealistic, you're optimistic, you don't know how dark it could get. I mean, I'm giving you real scripts here. I'm not talking about some imaginary, I've had these dialogues. I know they sound almost humorous. It's really tragic, to be honest. And it's hard to get through. And then the only thing you try to say, listen, you're so convinced. I mean, you're an intelligent person. How could you, are you 100% sure? But what's really happening here is not an intellectual conversation. It's an emotional one. They may intellectually agree, but emotionally they don't feel it. And that is why it's so sad. Why don't they emotionally feel it? Because they've been deprived. And they no longer think they deserve. So the only answer is, in that case, I don't tell people, no, you're lovable. I say, why don't you start doing things every day in your life? It's a little more spiritual. Even if you're not in the mood, be giving. Because even if it's not their mood, they're going to be bitter, and I'm not going to give anybody. I wasn't given. But behavioral change can actually begin to allow in more cognitive, emotional, and really ultimately spiritual change. It's like just telling a person who has decided, like I mentioned before with the toxins, that they don't deserve to breathe healthy air. So they're constantly going to places that are toxic. So you tell them, look, listen, don't do it every day, don't do it all the time, but every day for 5-10 minutes, why don't you go into healthy air? You say, but I don't feel that way. Doesn't matter whether you feel, just start breathing. You can't convince the person intellectually, just do it. And slowly you start tasting and saying, one second, you know what? Till now what I've been doing was everything was stale air. Now I really fresh air. So sometimes you need the behavioral commitment, which is why mitzvahs are not optional. Some people say, why is the Torah telling me what to do? You know why? Because you don't know what to do on your own and you're trapped in your own ego. You need to be told what to do. There was this Chabad Chassid, they visit these prisons on Purim or other times of the year, to lift up the spirits of the Jewish prisoners. They pray together, they celebrate, and so on. So one of the rabbis came and said to all the prisoners, okay, please, everybody roll up your sleeves. We're going to put on tefillin on all the males, all the men, all the Jewish men. So everyone did it. One guy, nope, I'm not doing it. I don't believe in this. So the rabbi gets up in the chair and says, listen, we're in a place here where you're told what to do. You're not asked what to do, okay? I'm telling you this is what you got to do. The guy ended up doing it. He's taking orders from the prison guards to do every stupid thing, that fine. Here he's telling him to do a mitzvah. No, I don't want to be told what to do. The fact is sometimes we need to be told what to do, let's be honest. I know it's not so democratic of a statement, but I think if everyone is honest with themselves, it's pretty healthy. It's coming from a healthy place. I'm not talking about someone who's trying to impose their control over you and to dominate and to undermine you. I'm not talking about an oppressor. But a person that we all know, the best thing to have in your life is a coach that you trust and you love and cares about you, is not judgmental and kicks you in your pants when you need to be kicked. I don't mean literally, get this sense. They motivate you. They tell you, get off your thing and do something. You see this with athletes who get into a funk. They need someone to give them a pep talk and really kick them in the butt, so to speak. That's what there's nothing wrong. I know that we live in a country where you say that it's abusive. Yeah, but go to an army and see how discipline is imposed. So I'm not suggesting we have to go do it. There's a story, there was a rabbi called Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He was a rabbi in Maplewood, New Jersey for many years. So years and years ago, he had asked the previous Chabad Rebbe, what do you do? In America, he's come to America, and he came to America, I think in the 30s. And there was a lot of assimilation, and a lot of Jews who are not committed, and so on. And he says, what do you do with Jews like that? Do you reprimand them? Do you yell at them? Do you ignore them? How do you... So the Rebbe gave him a brilliant answer. He said, you traveled out of Russia, you traveled through Turkey. And everything in life is a lesson in life. In Turkey, we all know there's the Turkish baths, which we call a schwitz. Basically, what do they call schwitzes? Everyone knows what a schwitz is. It's like as popular as the word chutzpah already, right? Schwitz. Saunas. Anyway, so what do they do? What's the custom there? You go into the Turkish bath, you go into a very hot room, whether it's a steamy room or non-steam, whatever it is. And I hear someone told me there's 14 different types of saunas. I used to think, huh? Okay. Anyway, you go in there, it opens up all your pores, right? The grime comes out. Then you climb higher because heat rises. And then even more pores open up. And then there's the thing, I've never done it, but I hear from people it's very invigorating. You pay an attendant to give you a few good slaps with eucalyptus leaves. It's like a broom made out of these leaves. And in some way it gives you back the circulation. It's very refreshing. You've had that? Yeah. Okay, is it good?
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay. So the Rebbe said this is the lesson. When you meet someone that has grime in their lives, first thing is you have to warm them up. To be kind to them. Warm them up. The next thing is you have to elevate them and warm them even more. And then they'll pay you to slap them. Okay? In other words, you don't do it. You wait for them to ask. It's a very fascinating lesson in life. Once there's the trust, not that you're waiting to do that, but they will want that. They will want it because you've established the warmth, the kindness. So, my friends, like this, we live in a time where the love is a very precious commodity, healthy love. But its truth is, it's very accessible. We just were not told how to do it. So sometimes you can have a treasure right near you, but you don't even know it's there. So even though for many of us it seems like an impossibility because whatever reason, we think we're unlovable or because our experiences, we've been hurt, disappointed, fear, routine, the years have rolled by. The fact of the matter is, one of the most beautiful things about Judaism tells you your soul is sitting always right near you or within you, waiting for you to say something. So the soul, remember, is not like the body. The soul remains that same child that may have not been nurtured by your parents. It's waiting for you to nurture it now. So now you become the parent of your own inner child, so to speak. But you have to know to do it. You have to be aware that it's there, waiting, and just waiting for you to nurture it, to water it, to pay it attention. And attention to the soul is not through material activities. It's through soulful activities. What do children need more than anything else? Not gifts, not videos, not trips. It's all nice. They need most anything, they just need attention. To know you care. To know that you're looking at them and not at your text. I was in Israel. I was sitting at a cafe. And I come in and I see a family sitting there. The father is texting. He's busy with his iPhone the whole time. I see his children are desperate to speak to him. But he's busy. They've already been trained because I see, I wasn't watching all the time, but I got the picture pretty quickly. I see that they want to speak to him, but they're not going to disturb him. So I was just wondering, how long is he going to be on it? I promise you, from the time they were there before me, from the time that I entered till the time I left, and he was still sitting there, even though half his family had left. And then I started wondering, do I do this? So I called up my daughter, and I'm not going to tell you what she said, but I don't need to. Not to that extent. And I was really taken by it, and I was saying, how many of us are doing this? And even myself, I'm not trying to put it. I'm not just saying he's like some type of. He was a mirror image, and we don't think it's a big thing, but it's a very big thing, because it means that I'm not important enough. You have something more important. Now I understand the temptation, and we're so busy and all that. I got all the reasoning behind it. You never know what email you have to answer, and you have clients and blah blah blah. You're going to lose money, and if you don't have the money, how are you going to support your children's education? I can give you the whole business, But it's like the parent that says, I'm never there for my children, but I'm building their security, Maybe you should be there for them, and that to be the security. What do they say? Instead of, they say, we'll build a better world for our children. Maybe we should build our children for a better world. It's a different way of looking at things. The point I'm making here is that we have so many distractions, and it's not a question of difficulty, it's a question of routines. We've gotten ourselves into bad habits. It's reinforced constantly by other people with bad habits. And that's why you need to have reminders. We come to the month of Elul that tells you, it's a month of love. You know what? Maybe start focusing on love, unadulterated love, without any other distractions and so on. It's about paying attention to your own self, respecting yourself. Not respecting yourself because you make a few more bucks or because you're going to dress nicer or something like that. That's all fine, good, feel good. Respect your inner self. You got a soul that's waiting to be treated nicely. And the more you treat it, the more it will repay you many times over. And that's how you build inner security, you build lovability, you build transcendence, and everything else that I described earlier. So it's sometimes just we need someone to remind us. And we need someone sometimes, yes, to push us. But no one should force themselves on you. You have to invite them in. Find someone you can talk to about it. And it's really the difference between life and death, to be very honest. I don't mean death, God forbid, in a negative way. I mean life and death in the spiritual sense, to be a really live person, living up to your and actualizing your potential, or just living by the bare minimum, mistapik b'mut, the mediocrity. So that's the month of Elul. And this is for everyone because love is an endless reservoir. It's an endless wellspring. So even if a person has a lot of love in their life, it's not like it ends there. It needs to constantly be rejuvenated, reinvigorated, like water. Just like, you could say, well, I drank a refreshing cup of water yesterday, but today's another day. So even if there's love, you constantly need to constantly reinforce it. And trust me, it's a time of battle. It's not like a neutral time. You're either building it or destroying it. They say either busy living or you're busy dying. It's like climbing on a mountain. You're either going up or down. That illusion that you're like on the fence is exactly that. It's an illusion. Like the guy that said, I used to think I'm undecided, now I'm not so sure. Indecision is a decision too. It's also a position. It's a position of not doing anything. And if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Anyway, enough cliches. I'm throwing out all these cliches, but as they say with paranoia, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean no one wants to get me. Just because I'm using cliches doesn't mean that cliches don't have any value. Let's put it that way. So everyone should have a very loving Anila Deidi V'Deidi Elul this week. We'll be here next week, and the following, all the way going to the high holidays. I'm back in town now. The last few months I was in Russia and Israel, a few other places in the world, but now back in full force. Meaningful Life Center is there for you in every possible way. If you don't have the book 60 Days or the weekly, daily emails, please subscribe to them. It's a free service every day, an exercise. The book, of course, is a more full-blown version. It's like a journal. It's an excellent tool, if I may say so myself, to especially this journey we're talking about. Because when you take the journey and you focus and you have a journal and you write something in every day, this is the time. 60 days began just a few days ago, but it's never too late to begin. And it's literally a 60-day journey from here till the end of the holiday season, Tishrei. So if you're familiar with the book, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, check it out. And you can go to our website, meaningfullife.com. If not, please leave your email if you haven't left it right here at the table. And with that said, we could already wish each other Ksiva V'Chsim Tov, which is a blessed year materially and spiritually and health, all in great health and in lots nachas. And a year that those of us that have to get married will get married and will dance at their weddings. Okay? And those of us that have to find other blessings, whether it's of health, as I said, of children, grandchildren, nachas, and so on, may God bless us all with that. And again, a very happy and compassionate and loving Elul. Everyone have a good week. Thank you.